WVW Broadcast Network is pleased to present In the Arena with Gold Star parents Billy and Karen Vaughn. Billy and Karen Vaughn are the parents of fallen Navy SEAL Aaron Vaughn, who is part of SEAL Team 6. On August 6, 2011, Aaron was killed in action in the Tangi River Valley of Afghanistan when a chopper called Extortion 17 carrying 30 Americans was shot down from the sky. The day Aaron's life ended, theirs began again. The Vaughns have emerged on the national scene as powerful spokespersons for not only our defenders still fighting on foreign soil, but also for the freedoms and prosperity here at home so many have sacrificed their lives to protect. Through the lens of hope and grave personal loss, their message is inspired by the firm belief that a representative republic is the noblest form of government ever devised by man and therefore demands protection. And now, here are your hosts, Billy and Karen Vaughn.
As you can see, Billy and I, we've met a lot of amazing people on this journey. This woman and I finally got to have lunch together last year sometime, and I'm telling you, we just became instant friends and realized we had so much in common. And I am really honored right now to welcome our next guest, Terry Strada. Terry, hi, and thank you so much for being with us.
Hi, well, thank you so much for having me.
You know, Terry, I remember when Tim tried for so long to get us to get to know each other. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do. We both have crazy schedules, so it took a little bit of time, didn't it?
It did. He kept connecting us on emails and everything else and said, you two women need to know each other. And after I met you, I knew why. Terry, you are the national chair of both the 9/11 families and Survivors United for Justice Against Terrorism. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And your story is completely heartbreaking and completely inspirational all at the same time. How did you end up with these platforms?
Well, as you know, I am a 9/11 widow. I lost my husband on September 11th, and we had 3 small children at the time. They were just 7, 4, and 4 days old. And right from the beginning, we all had questions. Why, who, and how did this happen to us? How did this happen to our families? And how did this happen to our country? And we started looking for the answers to those questions. And it led us down a path that we never could have imagined. And it led us down the path that Saudi Arabia, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, is strongly implicated at aiding and abetting the 19 hijackers that came to this country on 9/11 and killed nearly 3,000 people on American soil.
As you began to tell me about that journey and about those facts, I see myself as somebody, we both do, and Billy's way more keyed in on this than I was actually, but I see myself as somebody who keeps up with things, and yet you were telling me things that day that we had lunch about the Saudis that I had no clue about. But before we go there, can you just tell me, if you could just give our listeners a glimpse of what it was like on the morning of 9/11, if you could just spend just a couple minutes telling us. I think people never need to forget this, and I think the more personal stories people hear, the better. Could you just clue us in on what that morning was actually like?
Yeah, of course. It was a beautiful Tuesday morning. The sun was shining. Birds were chirping. Tom got up to go to work. He was only going to go in for half a day because we had just brought Justin home, our 3rd child. He was only 4 days old. And he got up to go to work. My brother was in town, so they both left together and headed off to the World Trade Center. I was home taking care of the kids when the phone rang, and I went over and answered it, and it was Tom. And he told me that a plane had hit the building. I was actually standing in front of the TV at the time, and there were no images on television, and I immediately thought, all right, a small airplane hit the building. You know, what's your plan? He said they had cell phones, because we didn't even own one at the time, and that he was with a group of coworkers, and they were going to the stairwell. There was a lot of screaming, a lot of chaos in the background, and it really sounded horrific. We said our I love yous, we said our goodbyes, and I said, please, just do what you can and get out. And that's the last I ever heard from him. And as minutes after we hung up the phone, I saw what the world was seeing. And I saw that black smoke billowing out of the North Tower, and it was terrifying. My mother was there, and I was screaming, how can he get out? Nobody can get out of this. And as the day unfolded, as we all know, it got from bad to worse as the next plane, or the next tower was attacked and the Pentagon was attacked. And it was just beyond horrific what we were witnessing and what I knew to be true, that my husband was in that building and most likely trapped.
I can't even fathom.
Terry, just let me say, I can't imagine watching that play out before my eyes as you did with a loved one there in that building. And I just, I just want to commend you, the courage that you've had. I mean, so many times American citizens go through something traumatic and horrific like this, and I don't blame them at all, but they, they don't have the fight to stand up against the injustice that's been done to them, a loved one, or their families, and it is absolutely amazing the courage, the fortitude that you've had, and even some of these other families. Yeah. And I just like to ask you first. Tell us a little bit about the organizations that you work with. How many families are represented? Who's involved? If you could just give us a short synopsis of that, please.
Sure. So the 9/11 Families United and Survivors United for Justice Against Terrorism consists of over 10,000 family members. And we all have the same goal, and that is to hold the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia accountable for the role that they played in aiding and abetting these 19 hijackers. So there's a small core group of us, the committee, that is the one that really organizes and did all the work in Washington, D.C., but we relied heavily on the entire organization to get involved, make the phone calls that were needed, come to Washington, D.C. when needed, go speak to their own congresspeople or senator in their hometowns. It was a grassroots campaign that we all banded together because we started this lawsuit in 2002 against the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and we found a lot of problems and obstacles along the way with our own government, with our administrations, with our laws, and we knew we had to get involved. And I became the national chair because I had the ability. My children were now a little bit older when I really needed to go down to Washington, D.C., but I had the heart and I had the fight to do whatever we have to do to bring the kingdom, to hold them accountable, to get the justice that all the families deserve.
Okay, Terry, now what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to take you back just a hair from the time that you lost Tom, your husband, and your children's father, until what you just told me about. So what caused you? What caused y'all? What did you see? What did you suspect? What did you begin to find out that let you see that there was a clear injustice, and that these families, y'all, weren't getting what you needed out of our government, out of our United States government, out of our government, by the way, that was unable to protect American citizens that day. So what caused y'all to go down that road?
Well, like you just said, we weren't protected, and that was really one of the very first things that didn't make any sense to me. How did this happen? How were we not protected? How did we not know what was going on? And so it were these burning questions of the what, how, and the who was behind this. And we were lied to from the very beginning. We were told there were no state sponsors involved in the attack of 9/11, and that simply is not true. So the first lie came with the Bush administration, months after 9/11. When one brave family went to a lawyer in South Carolina and said, what can we do? How do we hold the people that were behind this accountable? Since the hijackers are actually dead, who do we go after next? And so it's like, well, who bankrolled this? Who financed this attack? And it was through that we started to get material and discovery on, all roads were leading to Saudi Arabia. So all of the banking was leading to Saudi Arabia. We found out once the 28 pages were released, which was something that had been classified under the Bush administration again, which I'm sorry to say because I really liked George Bush, but he let us down a lot. So he classified 28 pages out of a joint inquiry into the attacks, and it was an entire chapter that had to do with the financing of the attacks. And when we finally got those released in 2016, there were so many strong leads to this Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. There was money actually going through the United States Embassy and the Saudi Embassy in Washington, D.C., through Prince Bandar's wife's bank account to some of the hijackers out in California. And these two agents, Omar Bayumi and Thumari, these two that we are fighting in the courts now to bring to justice, these guys were getting paid through these agents, these Saudi agents that were in the United States. So everything we've uncovered, almost everything, leads us to Saudi Arabia. And it's been a very painful, long fight because, yes, the government, our administrations, one after the other, has not sided with us. Our State Department certainly has not sided with us, not the Department of Justice or the Treasury Department. We have had to fight tooth and nail every single branch of our government to try to hold the kingdom accountable.
And folks, I'd like for y'all to let it sink in what Terry's actually telling us, because here's another instance of tax-paying Americans, American citizens trying to live their lives, go about being good citizens, obeying the laws, and then an injustice comes to them and their families. They lose loved ones. They have a great loss, and we find out that the federal government, the government that we pay our taxes to, the government that we elect, the government that we depend on to defend us, does not have our back. Not only do they not have our back, in many cases, as you've just heard Terry say, they are complicit, or because of alliances made, or because of money and lobbyists, they actually thwart the efforts then of the citizens. By the way, here's a mom raising a family who has to take it on herself, along with other citizens, to try to get justice for what has happened to thousands of American citizens by foreign agents. Terry, if you could, just here in the last minute and a half or so, just tell us now what you're doing, what you'd like to see happen, and by the way, how American citizens can help you in your efforts.
Okay, well, right now we're in the courts with Saudi Arabia since we had to fight to get a law enacted, the Justice Against Sponsorship of Terrorism Act. And that's really when Congress sent a clear signal that they were not happy with the way the kingdom was behaving. So Congress really became our very good friends.
And let me interject. Just by our conversation, you told me that was completely bipartisan, right?
Yes, completely bipartisan. It was an incredible. I worked on it for 4 years down in Washington, D.C. with other family members, of course, and my own family. My daughter came and my sons came down to D.C. as well. But yeah, very bipartisan. I mean, we had Chuck Schumer and John Cornyn working side by side with us on this. And when it went to a vote, we had 60 co-sponsors in the House, and it was an even split of 30-30, 30 Republicans, 30 Democrats. When we had to override the president veto of our bill and came back, it was 97-1 in the Senate.
Wow.
348 to 77, in the House. It was an incredible,
wow.
It might be the last greatest bipartisan effort we'll see in Congress for a very long time. That was September of 2016. But it was the president, that administration, so it was the Obama administration that was fighting us tooth and nail back then, and the State Department. I mean, they did a whisper campaign against the bill. On a Friday at 5:00 p.m., they sent 12 guys over from the State Department into Congress behind closed doors, held classified meetings,
wow.
saying, kill the bill.
Wow.
Kill the bill. It was incredible. We had staffers crying to us on the phone. We don't know what we're going to do now. We've got the president making phone calls, or the administration making phone calls over the weekend on Saturday and Sunday to leadership. And Chuck Schumer was like, I can't do this to these families. I can't do it to them.
Wow.
And John Cornyn said, we're going full steam ahead. We had to get Mitch McConnell on board. And really, he came on board because what he saw it was, for the truth of it, what it was, the bill, is that victims of terrorism were being denied their day in court. And he said, that's not right. He said, I may not agree with everything they're fighting for, but I'll stand and fight for that they're American citizens and they have the same right as every other American citizen to present their evidence in a courtroom and see what happens next. So that's where we are now. We're in a courtroom, we're fighting Saudi Arabia, they're fighting us nasty still. I mean, they are the nastiest country you ever want to go up against. They've spent millions of dollars. Their campaign against JASTA was disgraceful. Once they lost, they brought in our U.S. vets with a horrible, disgusting campaign to try to amend JASTA. They used them unwittingly. They spent $11 million, I believe, on that part of the campaign. I don't know exactly, where we're going to go from here, except hopefully the judge is going to keep moving this case forward. And our discovery, and we can depose witnesses now, even though the Saudis, we fly over to another country and the witness comes in and their lawyers are sitting there. They walk over to the Saudi lawyers, they sit down in front of our lawyers and they go, I know nothing. I know nothing. After they were promised as witnesses to come forward and tell us what they know. As soon as they speak to the Saudis, they're either threatened or they're intimidated. And they go, I know nothing. I won't speak to you now.
Terry, one final question. But these are good allies, aren't they?
Yeah.
Aren't these our allies?
Yeah, right. With friends, enemies. What's that saying? With
friends like this, who needs enemies?
Yeah.
With friends like this, who needs enemies? No. I don't understand this. I don't understand why administration after administration they've been protecting the Saudis over the concerns and rights of American citizens when they know. Look, I understand 9/11 was a huge intelligence failure. So it's going to be embarrassing to learn all the truths of 9/11 and where our CIA and where our FBI failed us, even though we know it. But then to have it out there, I guess, is something that they don't want. But no, I don't believe they're a good ally. Do we need them strategically in the Middle East? I want to believe that's true. But it's all based on a lot of falsities. And that's something that the American people and your viewers should understand, that it's based on a lot of falsities. The Saudis are very despicable and they're murderers. Look what they just did with Khashoggi. And it's the same pattern. Deny, then change your story as the narrative changes, and then say, oh, they were rogue. That's just what they tried to tell us about the 15 hijackers, that they were rogue. Even though for 15 months they were giving them the financing that they needed, and the agents in this country to set up their housing, they're buying their cars, their flying lessons, everything.
Terry,
it's us.
Thank you very much for being with us today. Thank you for your efforts, and God bless you in your efforts. Good providence to you and the families. But that's all the time we have, and we're gonna have to say goodbye to you until a different time. But God bless.
And
Great,
Terry, you are a fierce, courageous lioness, and I say courageous instead of fearless because courage is not the absence of fear. And I am just honored to call you my friend. Thank you for being with us.
I feel the same about you, Karen. I think we're just two kindred souls here.
God bless you. Have a wonderful day.
God bless you too.
So wow, that was something.
Absolutely. When you look back on that day, September 11th, 2001, it's just forever etched in our memory. I remember where I was that morning. I remember where I was driving down I-95. Going right over the Jupiter overpass when I heard that the plane had hit the building, and we thought, everybody thought in America that it was a small plane, it was an accident and everything, at that time. What do you remember?
Yeah, and I was actually on a job site with work, and I remember pulling up that morning and everybody saying, hey, this gives me chills every time I talk about it, hey, There's been a plane that's crashed into one of the Twin Towers, and one of the guys on our job site, his sister was working there, and he was trying to reach his sister and couldn't. And I just remember we tried to. Our daughter, remember, Tara was in college, and Aaron was at work, and Anna, our youngest, was in school, and we gathered everybody. I mean, I guess that's what everybody across the nation did, if they could, is we just started gathering our family.
Yeah, because it wasn't long at all. Then the second plane hit the other tower, and we realized that this was an attack on the United States of America. And that's right. We gathered our family at home. People across the country did, and so many. Not affected like Terry Strada's family and those that had victims actually in the towers that day, the first responders who responded, and many of them were lost. But it changed our country that day, and it changed the lives of thousands of Americans who that day decided that they would go and defend our country, as it did our family, and on changing the lives of those thousands of Americans, thousands and thousands of families have been affected by 9/11. And the sad, sad part about it is, here again, it should have never happened. Our government did not have the backs of its citizens. And the attacks were finally thwarted that day by American citizens.
Right.
Not by the federal government, not by the federal government who should have been defending us, but by American citizens who stood up on Flight 93 and said, not on our watch, and thwarted an attack by this enemy.
And you know, Billy, one of the quotes that came out of the wake of 9/11 that stuck with me and has been in my gut all these years is when George Bush came on camera and said freedom itself was attacked this morning by a faceless coward, and freedom will be defended. And something in me knew that all of us were going to be affected by that statement. We knew that our nation was going to change. We knew that we were now at war. And as we told our viewers in the first show, just a few months later, it did affect our family because our only son, our firstborn child, as we told you before, went down to the Navy recruiter's office on his 21st birthday and joined the SEAL Challenge program. And as you know, our fate was pretty much sealed on the morning of 9/11 because many years later we would lose him in battle fighting for this country.
Fighting the very enemy that attacked us that day, by the way. And yes, President Bush did utter those great words, but it wasn't but a few hours or a day or two later that President Bush said this: Islam is a religion of peace. As he had jihadis standing behind him. And Americans, we need to remember that. President Bush was a good president, but he did not know who the enemy was. And that's what still stands with me today, that over 16 years later, we're still fighting an enemy that's a primitive enemy made formidable by the United States of America because we refuse to recognize that enemy. And it's cost us the lifeblood of many, many brave men and women because our government doesn't have their back.
And just shifting gears a little bit, I know we mentioned when we were talking to Terry, we mentioned the name Tim Brown. Tim Brown was Fire Department, New York, FDNY, Special Operations in the mayor's office on the morning of 9/11. And several years back, I had the privilege of meeting him first, and then you met him afterwards. But I never will forget, one of my first times with Tim Brown was him taking myself and several of my friends through the 9/11 Memorial Museum. And to watch that man who was there that morning tell story after story as we went from room to room, and he was reminded of different things that happened that morning. I don't think that I've ever had a more solemn experience in my life outside of our son's memorial services. I never will forget Tim telling us about when one of the buildings collapsed. He was in the basement of it, and he said that it felt like a tornado had come through the building, and everything went black. If you can imagine a building that size collapsing, the fact that he's still alive to tell about it is absolutely astounding. But I remember him saying everything collapsed, everything went black. Wind was blowing him so hard that he grabbed a hold of a concrete piling to keep from flying through the air and hugged it as tight as he could. And then he said when everything finally stopped, he started feeling around trying to find a place to crawl out because it was so black. And I believe he said that he pretty much knew at that point that he probably wasn't coming out of there. He realized because of his experience what had happened. And he said he started feeling around, and all of a sudden his hand touched a metal grate. And when he touched the metal grate, a hand came through that grate and touched his. And I can hardly fathom an experience like that. He actually rescued the people behind that grate, and several people lived that day because of Tim Brown's valiant efforts. But that morning did in fact change everything. And for people like Terry Strada, it certainly changed everything. We saw her beautiful daughter on camera for just a minute. You guys didn't get to see her, but her beautiful 21-year-old daughter, who was just a baby. It's unthinkable, the suffering that's taken place because of that day.
Well, folks, we're going to have to go, and but I do want to tell you, Karen and I, we're just common people. We're just a mom and a dad, and a lot of our guests on our shows are going to be people who have been personally impacted by failures in our government across this land from time to time. So, Karen, you got anything else you'd like to say?
Well, I would like to just remind you that Billy and I have both written a book in the wake of what we've experienced. Billy's book came out first. It was called Betrayed, The Shocking True Story of Extortion 17, and you can find it on Amazon or on our website, which is forourson.us. That's FOROURSON.us. And I wrote a book that came out last May, and it is called World Changer. Again, it's Aaron's story. And I love the book, and you can find it also on Amazon or on our website, forourson.us, or on my personal website, officialkarenvaughn.com. And we also always want to remind you that Billy and I make ourselves available to speak across the country. It's become a deep passion of ours to share with Americans what we've learned through this journey and what we feel common Americans can join us in doing to protect our nation.
And folks, remember this, if our republic is to be saved, if it is to survive, it will be by the grace of God and by American citizens.
That's right.
Not by our federal government.
So this has been Karen and Billy Vaughn on In the Arena with Billy and Karen Vaughn. Our website, again, is forourson.us or officialkarenvaughn.com. Thank you so much for being with us.